Hey guys, I got the inspiration for this video from the Chess.com Champions Chess Tour event, which is going on right now. It has a lot of the top players in the world playing interesting, rapid games of 10 minutes against each other. But before we go into the examples from that event, I wanted to show you what attacking technique looks like in the game of lesser experienced players. So actually, this position first occurred in a game of a student of mine, and they were playing black against someone who was quite high rated, like in the 1900s. So by this point, white has managed to set up a beautiful attacking position. The knight is entrenched in a gorgeous square, like there's support from the two bishops, the queen, and basically all you need to do to win this game is find a way for the queen to get to h6, right? So white should be very aggressively minded at this point, but somehow white really slow played it with a move like queen f4, which, it still keeps a winning advantage, but after a few more slow moves and refusing to land the decisive blow, white actually manages to lose this game. So the first step in, of course, attacking is to be quite decisive when you have all your pieces set up in the right positions, and there is a chance for some sacrifices. So then I gave this position to play out to some lesser experienced students of mine, giving them a few lessons in attack on the way. And this student actually played the correct move, knight takes h5. Yeah, checks, captures, and threats, looking for ways to open up the opponent's king. This move should definitely be coming to mind. So the point is, if black takes the knight, then you get this bishop out of the way, and you get to come in with the queen and get a pretty elementary checkmate like that. So I was practicing against my student. I played the move bishop takes g5, which I knew was at least a better attempt. And okay, black is still on the verge of getting mated. Might as well take the knight. Check, check. And here's the key position, right? So you have the black king pretty trapped in a dangerous pattern. Very often, this kind of pattern leads in checkmate on this square, where you move the bishop out of the way, you move up your queen, and then you checkmate here when the black king is on f8. But here that's not going to work because that square is guarded by the queen. So how do you win this position? Well, you just got to be precise about where you move this bishop. And actually, either of these squares will do the job, because you're not really playing for checkmate, which is impossible, but what you are playing for is an overload of this queen, which cannot simultaneously keep the rook guarded and also recapture the piece on c4. If you don't recapture that bishop, your king is open, you're down material. But if you do recapture it, your king is open and you're down material after losing that rook. So that's basically the way to win. You can also go to e4 and take that bishop. It's the same concept, right? So this is where my young student kind of faltered. And I think, for anyone rated, basically below 1500, they're probably going to have had this experience of letting the opponent's king escape, right? So fumbling the attack, basically. They tried this check, doesn't really change anything. They were trying to see where this bishop could go, finally moved it all the way back, and then just started giving checks, right? And look at the consequences of kind of aimless checks, is that the black king is basically forced into safety. So this is exactly what we don't want to do. That king was on h8, now it's on c8, and now it's going to be on b8. Like, how did it become so safe? Yes, white did take a bunch of pawns along the way, but this is a huge relief for black, whose king is now completely safe. There's actually pretty good piece coordination in black's camp, and we can say that white's attack did not work out. So at the less experienced levels, that's unfortunately what happens quite a lot, that you, instead of keeping the king sort of locked in the danger zone and finding a way to exploit it there, that with a series of unfortunate checks, you actually wind up letting your opponent's king escape. All right, now we're going to go to the examples of top level players. Let's actually start from this moment. This is the game between Denis Lazovic and Magnus Carlsen from today. And here Magnus decides to launch his pawn majority, really natural move. He has 4 pawns against 3. And I certainly prefer Black's position, even though the computer is still saying it's equal. But, you know, with pawns like that coming against you, you gotta see the practical advantage to being Black here. So White attacked this pawn, and Magnus decided to defend it. A White played here. It's actually not really easy to find a plan for White, so I guess, I don't know, maybe he had some ideas of going Queen b6 at some point. But Magnus sees a chance to go e3. And this is the first sort of surprising move. Like, why is he putting his pawn under attack? It's attacked 3 times, defended 2 times. So is he planning to recapture here? Well, the answer is no. So he had a cool idea here where he just advances this pawn. So he sacrificed a pawn. He's trying to get to this king. Now, he's not winning. And I think there's different ways for White to play. One of them actually is to just take the pawn, let the queen in, block the check, and defend the bishop. But of course, you know, I can see why he wasn't so sure about this. I mean, there's the f3 pawn is going to fall. So White decided not to take the pawn. There was also some move like Queen d1 that the computer was pointing out. I mean, none of these things are really obvious for White, and especially in a rapid game. It's going to be hard to make these decisions. But he went e4. Yeah, I mean, he's basically attacking the pawn with the queen, trying to connect the queen to the defense, and, you know, maybe potentially going to have a chance to use these extra center pawns. But here's Magnus's cool idea. So he went f2, and king takes. So now what? Actually, I realized I should really flip the board. So don't be shocked, guys. We're about to flip the board to Black's perspective. Okay. King is out. How are we going to attack him? Now, I bet you guys are going to be tempted by the checks. Check, check, check. But if you do any of those moves, the king just runs back. Right? So this is where we have to make a move that doesn't allow the king to run back. This is a really cool move, definitely a very important part of Black's attack, is keeping the king trapped out in the middle of the board. So right now, Black is down 2 pawns, but they have made White's king way more open and kind of trapped in the center. So let's take a look at how Carlsen converted this. Rook b8 is a nice move, like activating the rook on that open file. And here, okay, he kind of, you know, doesn't conduct this attack the way the computer would like. The computer really likes the move a rook to b4, attacking that pawn, and basically trying to like provoke a white piece to go to c4 to try to block off that rook. But there's flaws with all these moves. Like, you might want to go here, but the problem is you wind up getting pinned. You start losing material. If you go with the bishop, the problem is that then there's no one to guard that pawn when the king moves away. So we take, and then we like invade from this side. And again, the computer is loving this for Black. So that was like more precise, but what Carlsen did is still very logical. So he goes rook f8, king e2, c4. It's kind of beautiful. Actually, how many pawns he's giving away in the pursuit of white's king. So I kind of assume that on rook c4, there's bishop b5 again. So the white pawn took. Rook b2. King d3. Yeah, king d1, there's a very unpleasant check from a4. So king d3, queen e5. Well, there's no more point for the queen to be on h2 when the white king is now like in the center, so she joins the attack. Rook b3 is the big threat. Rook c3. And then he makes a move, which, oh, not yet actually. First he goes bishop a4. Yeah, and right here he makes a move that really made me think for a bit. It's so like spectacular, actually. Rook f2. I mean, it is a very beautiful position, and the first question is, why can't we just take that rook? So if white takes it, how do we follow up the attack? I mean, we're down a lot of material now. Well, you gotta keep looking at checks, captures, and threats. So we go here. By the way, the king cannot go there because that's checkmate. If the king goes here, I mean, you're stepping into a discovery. It is going to eventually be checkmate. This rook is hanging in a lot of lines. And finally, if you take the bishop, then you're kind of getting exposed over here. And the unexpected check comes from g5. So we really needed to find one more check, and thankfully there's a square where we have it, and there's no block by the queen, and it's a very cute checkmate. I mean, black has only a queen and a rook, but somehow they managed to trap that king. So Carlsen's idea was definitely very beautiful with rook f2, and therefore the rook was not captured. White played queen c1, and Carlsen, I mean, that's a better move. Yeah, taking the rook is not a good idea. Carlsen got himself a winning position pretty quickly. Unfortunately, he didn't checkmate white with queen f4. That literally would be like checkmate after one more move. And somehow this game ended in a draw. Yeah, I'm sure he was probably very frustrated with that. But overall, I would say he did some really cool, instructive things that we can learn from, especially the way he used his pawns, right, to draw that king out, like f2, and then sealed off the escape route, keeping this king in the center. So that's a very important part of a successful attack, is that you don't let your opponent's king back to safety. And then he just brought in all his pieces. He used those open files with the rooks, used more line clearance ideas, you know, basically threw everything to open up those lines to get to the white king. And every single piece was involved in the attack. Like, actually, nothing was missing. Even the bishop came in, and that's what allowed, you know, these beautiful moves like rook f2. So using all of your pieces to their maximum is also very important in chess. All right, so now we're going to look at another game played by Daniil Dubov versus MVL in their Armageddon game. So they were tied in the match, and Daniil got the white pieces and needed to win. And he has a great attacking position here with bishops of opposite color and black's king being much more in danger. I mean, plus white has a strong pawn on e5, while black has kind of a useless doubled c-pawn. So he starts off with king h2, which is a nice move that makes his king really safe so he can bring his queen here without worrying about a queen trade. So MVL decides to just block the pawn. He decided, like, can't really hide the king here because actually this pawn might just start to run. So he tries to block it. The queen comes in. Obviously, if you want to attack, you shouldn't be trading the queens. And this is where the beautiful stuff in this game starts. So the move bishop e7, putting the bishop on prise. The idea is you really can't take it because giving up the f6 square to the white queen is too dangerous. If you go there, it's checkmate. And if you go there, I mean, we will hunt down your rook, actually. Like that. And you see that black is losing that rook here, and that's the end. So the bishop was invincible, and black played here. Bishop moved to that square. So, you know, in general, what white has achieved is like a more open diagonal for their queen to potentially use. And queen b2. So how do we defend against that checkmate threat? We could play something like queen g5. This move looks really passive. But white went for the most powerful option, just destroying black's bishop on e4. And now was the part where white had like a very beautiful win. And that was this pawn move. So it took me a little while to just kind of look at the lines, figure out why this is so winning. But first of all, this one was kind of easy, you know, that's a checkmate in one. If they don't take the pawn, you can win in multiple ways. I mean, you can push up that pawn, you could go queen d8, the black king is really trapped, so that's not much of a defense. If they take with the rook, that's a deflection. So your queen gets to enter with a check, the king gets pushed out. And there's really multiple ways to win here. I think this is maybe the shortest. You're threatening checkmate here. Well, yeah, it's kind of hard for them to stop that. Like, because even if they move their pawn, the king still doesn't really get to escape. So finally, they could take with the pawn. Queen h6, king d5, and then bishop b4. So you're threatening checkmate on d6. If they take this pawn, it doesn't really help. It's still a checkmate. And basically, rook here, you can just push this pawn and push it all the way and win. So that's really the key move, like f5. So it's kind of like, what is that about? It's actually about giving this queen entry squares in the most quick way, right? So you're either going to get that or you're going to get that. You are going to push out the king to like a very vulnerable square in the center. That's the point. Unfortunately, what white did was like harder to win from. I mean, this move was still winning. Yes, you're threatening to just win the rook, and I can definitely understand why white went for that. But it gave black a chance to pull back the queen. So it was like that one tempo, actually, and like having the queen here, which made it so much harder to win. And e6, of course, like all of this looks so dangerous for black that it's like a miracle that black is holding on. And there's still a winning move for white. White played e7, super tempting, just trying to promote that pawn. But incredibly, after king e6, like there's no way to promote it. Because every move you make with the queen, they will just sack the rook and get the pawn and get into some sort of drawn endgame. So white just, eventually that's how the game ended. There was one last chance to win, which was this move bishop to f8. Not obvious because this queen can sort of attack this pawn like that, right? And it feels like, oh, I'm exposing my own king. There could be a perpetual check here. So in a rapid game, this is kind of scary looking, but apparently white just kind of gets out from that check. And if black captures, we also throw in this important check. And the queen guarding d2 is going to allow us to escape perpetual with having an extra bishop. So something like that. If they go back, you go this way. And see, like, this is where having a queen on the d file comes in handy. But I would say that, yes, it's not easy at all to find bishop f8 here when you have like this kind of move available. And probably, in hindsight, you would say that would have been definitely easier to work out the lines if you focus on the move f5. Yeah, so beautiful move. And basically that king in the middle of the board is going to be trapped in. All right, guys, so that is our lesson for the day. It's a little bit of inspiration for you guys on how to attack your opponent's king. Definitely got to be creative about closing off his escape routes and like finding your entry points in. And yeah, this event on chess.com is really exciting, and I will show you more examples from there in future videos.